I'll never forget the day my world came crashing down. It was a typical Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the sun filters through the curtains just right, casting a warm glow over everything. I was at home, the scent of freshly brewed coffee lingering in the air, when I stumbled upon the truth that would unravel my life as I knew it. My wife, Sarah, had left her phone unattended on the kitchen counter, and a message popped up. The name that flashed on the screen was one I recognized all too well, Mark, our financial advisor. At first, I felt a twinge of curiosity. Mark had always been charming, the kind of guy who could make anyone feel at ease. He'd helped us navigate our investments, our savings, and even our retirement plans. But as I glanced down at the words on the screen, my heart sank. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Just you and me." The message was innocent enough on the surface, but the implication was like a dagger to my chest. I stood there frozen, my mind racing. How could she? How could she betray me like this? The betrayal felt like a physical blow, knocking the breath out of me. I had always trusted Sarah, believed in our marriage. The image of her laughing with Mark, sharing secrets that should have been ours, burned into my mind. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, and I had to steady myself against the counter. The emotional turmoil was overwhelming. I couldn't believe I was in this situation. My instincts screamed to confront her, to demand answers, but a part of me hesitated. I needed to know more. I needed evidence. The thought of blindly accusing her without proof made my stomach churn. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think rationally. I had to gather information first. I had to understand the extent of her betrayal. That evening, Sarah came home later than usual, her laughter ringing through the house like a cruel reminder of my shattered trust. She greeted me with a kiss, the same kiss that had once made me feel loved and cherished. Now it felt like a mockery. I played the part of the dutiful husband, asking about her day, feigning interest in her responses. Inside, I was a storm of anger and hurt, trying to keep my composure. As the days passed, I found myself caught in a web of intrigue and despair. I began to observe her more closely, analyzing every interaction, every text, every unexplained late night. I felt like a detective in a noir film, piecing together clues in a case that had become deeply personal. I started to notice the subtle changes in her behavior, the way she smiled a little too brightly, how she spent more time on her phone, the late-night excuses that seemed to come more frequently. The more I observed, the more my heart sank. I felt like a stranger in my own home, and the man who had once been my friend, Mark, was now an enemy. I couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy that clawed at my insides. Had I not been enough for her? Was our life together not enough to keep her faithful? The questions tormented me, gnawing at my sense of self-worth. One night, as I lay in bed beside her, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts of revenge. The betrayal was like a poison coursing through my veins, and I knew I couldn't let it fester. I had to take control. I had to reclaim my life from the ashes of this betrayal. But how? The answer was there, lurking in the shadows of my anger: our finances. I turned to my side, watching her sleep peacefully, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I felt a strange mixture of love and hatred. I had dedicated years to building a life with her, and now she was tearing it apart with a single thread of deception. I would not stand idly by. I would fight back. As dawn broke, casting a pale light across the room, I made a silent vow. I would uncover the truth, and I would take back what was rightfully mine. I would expose her affair and ensure that she faced the consequences of her actions. The financial advisor, the man who had wormed his way into our lives, would not escape unscathed either. I would make them both pay. And so began my journey into the murky waters of betrayal and revenge, a path I never thought I would have to walk. I felt empowered and terrified at the same time, a strange combination that propelled me forward. I was ready to gather evidence and take control of my life again. The days following my discovery were a blur of emotions and clandestine activities. I transformed into a man on a mission, fueled by a cocktail of anger, betrayal, and determination. I needed to gather evidence, solid proof that would not only expose Sarah's infidelity, but also arm me for the inevitable confrontation. I realized that knowledge was power, and I was going to wield it like a sword. I started with a simple plan. I would track her movements, document every late night, every suspicious phone call, and every text message I could find. I became a ghost in my own home, observing Sarah as she went about her daily routine. I took note of her phone habits, watching for any signs of communication with Mark. My heart raced each time she laughed at her phone, each time she turned away from me to send a text. One evening, as she was getting ready for a supposed girls' night out, I decided to put my plan into action. I casually asked her about her plans, feigning indifference. She smiled, her eyes sparkling with excitement, and told me about dinner and drinks with friends. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. I had to find a way to access her phone. After she left, I waited for what felt like an eternity. The house was silent, and the ticking of the clock echoed in my ears. I grabbed her phone from the kitchen counter, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I was crossing a line, but I felt justified. I needed to know the truth. I quickly unlocked her phone, and the first thing that caught my eye was a series of messages from Mark. My stomach twisted as I read their exchanges. There were flirtatious remarks, plans to meet up, and even a few suggestive emojis that made my skin crawl. Each message felt like a stab to my heart, and yet at the same time it fueled my resolve. This was the evidence I needed. As I scrolled through their conversations, I felt an array of emotions wash over me: anger, betrayal, and a sickening sense of loss. I couldn't believe the woman I had shared my life with was capable of such deceit. I quickly took screenshots of their conversations, ensuring I had everything I needed to confront her later. I was building my case, and it felt empowering, but I wasn't done yet. I needed to confirm their meetings. I began to track her whereabouts discreetly, using a combination of social media check-ins and apps that allowed me to see her location when she was out. It was like playing a game, a twisted game of cat and mouse, and I was determined to win. That weekend, Sarah had another girls' night. I knew she was meeting Mark, and I felt a surge of adrenaline as I decided to follow her. I couldn't believe I was reduced to this, tailing my wife like a detective in a low-budget film, but I had to see it for myself. I needed to know what was happening behind my back. I waited until she left the house, slipping into my car and following her discreetly. My heart raced as I kept a safe distance, watching her drive to a trendy restaurant downtown. I parked a few blocks away and waited, my breath catching in my throat as I saw her enter the establishment. I had never felt so small, yet so powerful at the same time. After a while, I saw Mark arrive. He was dressed sharply, exuding confidence as he approached her. I felt a wave of nausea as I watched them greet each other with a hug, their body language betraying a familiarity that cut deep. They exchanged pleasantries, and my heart sank as I realized how easily she laughed at his jokes, how her eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. I was invisible to her now. As they settled in at a table, I couldn't bring myself to get any closer. I watched from the shadows, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. I felt like a voyeur in my own life, but I was determined to gather more evidence. I took photos from a distance, capturing their smiles and the way they leaned in towards each other, lost in their own world. The dinner stretched on, and I felt the anger boiling inside me. How dare she? How dare he? My mind raced with thoughts of revenge, and I knew I had to act. I couldn't let them continue this affair without consequences. After what felt like an eternity, they left the restaurant together. I followed them as they walked to a nearby bar, their laughter ringing in my ears like a death knell. I parked a few blocks away, my heart pounding as I prepared for the next phase of my plan. I decided to wait until they were inside before I approached the bar. I had to confront them, but I wanted to do it in a way that would leave no doubt in Sarah's mind about the extent of my knowledge. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal, to understand that I wouldn't be a passive victim in this scenario. As I stood outside the bar, the dim light spilling onto the sidewalk, I felt a mixture of fear and determination. I was about to step into a confrontation that would change everything. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. I would expose them both, and I would reclaim my life. But first, I needed to make sure I had everything in place for the financial war that was about to unfold. I was ready to take control, and nothing would stop me. The confrontation loomed over me like a dark cloud, but before I could face Sarah and Mark, I needed to prepare. I had gathered enough evidence to confront them, but I also needed a plan to reclaim control over my life and finances. The betrayal had shaken me to my core, but it had also ignited a fire within me. I was ready to fight back, and I was determined to emerge victorious. As I sat at my desk, staring at the evidence I had collected, my mind raced with possibilities. I thought about our financial situation. Sarah and I had built a life together, and our finances were intertwined in ways I had never fully appreciated until now. We had joint accounts, investments, and assets that could easily become a battleground in the wake of this betrayal. I needed to map out a strategy that would ensure I came out on top. First, I took stock of our financial situation. I knew our savings accounts, the investments we had made together, and the assets we owned. I pulled up our bank statements and investment portfolios, meticulously going through each line item. I was looking for any discrepancies, any signs of mismanagement, or anything that could give me leverage. I had to familiarize myself with every detail so I could plan my next move. The more I delved into our finances, the more I realized how vulnerable I had been. I had trusted Sarah completely, never questioning her decisions or her judgment when it came to money. But now, that trust felt like a liability. I needed to take control of our financial accounts and ensure that I was the one making the decisions from here on out. The thought gave me a sense of empowerment. I began to draft a plan. My first step would be to secure our joint accounts. I knew that if I acted quickly, I could withdraw a significant portion of our savings and transfer them to an account solely in my name. It wasn't just about the money, it was about reclaiming my power. I wanted to ensure that if Sarah and Mark thought they could continue their affair without repercussions, they were sorely mistaken. Next, I needed to gather more evidence, not just for my own satisfaction but to use as leverage. I considered hiring a private investigator to get the details I needed about their meetings and any financial exchanges they might have had. I imagined the look on Sarah's face when I confronted her with indisputable proof of her betrayal, not just the emotional aspect but also the financial implications of her actions. But as I plotted my course, I also grappled with the moral implications of my decisions. Was I becoming the very thing I despised? Was I stooping to their level? I wrestled with these questions, trying to find a balance between justice and revenge. Deep down, I knew that I had to protect myself first and foremost. This was about survival, about reclaiming my life after it had been turned upside down. I decided to take a calculated approach. I would wait until I had all the evidence in hand before making any moves. I wanted to ensure that Sarah had no way to cover her tracks, no chance to hide the truth from me. I needed to be patient to play this game wisely. I started to document everything meticulously: dates, times, locations, and conversations. I kept a journal of my observations, writing down every detail that could support my case. It became an obsession, a way to channel my anger into something productive. I felt like a chess player, strategizing my next moves, anticipating their reactions and planning for every possible outcome. As I continued to gather evidence, I also began to think about my emotional state. I knew I couldn't let my anger cloud my judgment. I had to remain calm and composed, even when the urge to lash out was strong. I started exercising more, using the time to clear my head and focus on my goals. I found solace in running, the rhythmic pounding of my feet on the pavement mirroring the determination building inside me. The more I planned, the more I felt a sense of control returning to my life. I was no longer the passive husband who had been blindsided by betrayal. I was a man on a mission, ready to take back what was mine and ensure that Sarah and Mark faced the consequences of their actions. As the days turned into weeks, I felt a shift within myself. I was no longer consumed by feelings of inadequacy. I was empowered by my resolve. I had a plan, a strategy that would allow me to reclaim my life. The thought of confronting Sarah and Mark filled me with a mix of dread and excitement. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face them. I started to envision the moment of confrontation. I would lay out the evidence before them, watch as their faces turned pale with realization. I would make it clear that their actions had consequences, and I would no longer be the man who allowed himself to be walked all over. I would take control of our finances, of my life, and I would emerge stronger than ever. With my plan solidified, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I knew I was ready for the next phase of this battle. I would execute my strategy, and nothing would stand in my way. The financial war was about to begin, and I was determined to win. The day had finally arrived. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, meticulously gathering evidence and formulating a plan to reclaim my life. I felt a mixture of adrenaline and apprehension coursing through my veins as I sat at my desk, staring at the bank statements and evidence I had compiled against Sarah and Mark. It was time to execute my plan. I had decided to confront Sarah first. I wanted to make sure she understood the gravity of her actions before I involved Mark. I knew that if I caught her off guard, she would be more likely to reveal the truth and perhaps even show remorse, if such a thing was possible. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal before I took control of our finances. I waited until evening, when I knew she would be home from work. I had set the stage, preparing the living room with the evidence laid out on the coffee table. I wanted her to see it all at once, the messages, the photos, everything. I wanted her to understand that I had been watching, waiting, and now I was ready to confront her. When she walked through the door, I felt my heart race. I greeted her with a smile, but it was a facade. As she dropped her bag and made her way to the kitchen, I could feel the tension in the air. I took a deep breath and called her name. "Sarah, can we talk?" She turned, her expression shifting from casual to guarded. "Sure, what's up?" "Come sit down," I said, motioning to the couch. I could see the flicker of concern in her eyes, but I pressed on, determined to maintain control of the situation. "I found something I think we need to discuss." As she settled into the couch, I took a moment to gather my thoughts. I could feel the weight of the evidence in my hands, the truth that would shatter the illusion of our life together. I placed the stack of papers on the coffee table between us, the edges crisp and clean, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing inside me. "Do you know what this is?" I asked, my voice steady. She glanced at the papers, confusion washing over her face. "What are you talking about?" I leaned forward, my heart pounding. "These are messages between you and Mark, our financial advisor, the man who has been helping us manage our money." Her face paled as realization dawned on her. "What do you mean?" She stammered, her voice trembling. "What I mean, Sarah, is that you've been having an affair with him. I've seen the messages, the flirty exchanges. I followed you the other night when you went out. I watched you laugh and flirt with him. How could you do this to me?" The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as her expression shifted from shock to defensive anger. "You have no right to invade my privacy like this," she snapped, her voice rising. "You've been spying on me." "I had to know the truth," I replied, my voice calm despite the tempest inside me. "You've betrayed me, and now I'm taking control of our finances. I can't trust you anymore, Sarah." Her anger turned to desperation. "You're overreacting. It's not what you think." I couldn't believe her audacity. "Not what I think. I have the evidence right here. You've been lying to me for months, and you think I'm overreacting. You think I'll just sit back and let you continue this charade." As she struggled to find her words, I could see the panic rising in her eyes. I had her on the ropes, and I wasn't going to let her escape. "I'm withdrawing our savings and transferring them to an account in my name. You won't have access to any of our funds until we sort this out. I won't let you use our money to fund your affair. Please don't do this," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "We can work this out. I can end things with Mark. Just give me a chance." I shook my head, my resolve hardening. "It's too late for that. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine. I deserve to protect myself after what you've done." With that, I stood up and walked towards the door, ready to leave her in the wake of her choices. I could feel the weight of the betrayal lifting slightly, replaced by a sense of empowerment. I was finally taking control of my life, but I wasn't done yet. I had one more step to execute my plan. I needed to confront Mark. I wanted him to know that I was aware of his betrayal and that I would not let him get away with it. I had to make him understand the consequences of his actions. I drove to his office, my mind racing with thoughts of how I would confront him. I parked outside and took a moment to breathe deeply, gathering my thoughts. I wanted to catch him off guard, just as I had with Sarah. I wanted him to feel the fear of losing everything he had worked for. As I walked through the glass doors of his office building, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I spotted him at his desk, engrossed in paperwork, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. I approached his desk, my heart pounding, ready to unleash my fury. "Mark," I said, my voice steady but laced with anger. He looked up, surprise etched on his face. "We need to talk." He straightened in his chair, a flicker of concern crossing his features. "What's going on?" I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. "I know about the affair with Sarah. I have evidence. You've betrayed not only our trust but also your professional ethics. I won't let this slide." His face paled and I could see the gears turning in his mind. I cut him off, my voice rising. "Don't even try to deny it. You've crossed a line and I'm not going to let you get away with it. I'll make sure everyone knows what you've done. Your reputation, your career, it's all at stake." The fear in his eyes was palpable and I could see him weighing his options. I had him right where I wanted him. "I want you to end things with Sarah now. I want you to understand that there are consequences for your actions and I'm ready to take this as far as I need to." Mark nodded slowly, realizing the gravity of the situation. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this," he said, his voice shaking. "Good," I replied, stepping back, feeling a sense of triumph wash over me. "This is just the beginning. I'm reclaiming my life, and you'll both face the consequences of your choices." As I walked out of the office, I felt a rush of empowerment. I had executed my plan, confronted both Sarah and Mark, and taken control of my finances. The weight of betrayal was still heavy on my shoulders, but I felt lighter knowing I was no longer a victim. I was a man on a mission, ready to face whatever came next. The fallout from my confrontation with Sarah and Mark was immediate and intense. I had taken the reins of my life, but the emotional aftermath was a turbulent storm that threatened to engulf me. I had exposed their affair, taken control of our finances, and now I had to confront the reality of what lay ahead. After leaving Mark's office, I returned home, my mind racing. I had withdrawn a significant amount of money from our joint accounts and transferred it into an account solely in my name. I felt a rush of exhilaration at having regained control, but the emptiness that lingered in my chest was hard to ignore. I had fought back, but the victory felt bittersweet. When I walked through the door, the house felt eerily quiet. I knew Sarah would be waiting for me, and I braced myself for the confrontation that was sure to come. I could already imagine her expressions of anger and desperation, the tears that would fall as she realized the full weight of her betrayal. I had taken everything from her, her security, her trust, and now her access to our shared finances. As I entered the living room, I found her sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. She looked up as I walked in, and I could see the mixture of fear and anger in her gaze. "You can't just do this," she shouted, her voice cracking. "You're ruining everything." I felt a surge of anger at her words. "You ruined everything, Sarah. You made your choice when you decided to betray me. I'm not going to let you manipulate me into feeling guilty for taking control of my life." She stood up, pacing the room, her hands wringing together in frustration. "You don't understand. I was confused. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "Confused?" I echoed incredulously. "You were having an affair with our financial advisor. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a conscious choice. You need to own up to what you've done." Tears streamed down her face as she sank back onto the couch, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "I'm so sorry, I really am. I never meant to hurt you. I thought I could fix it." "Fix it?" I snapped, feeling the anger boiling inside me. "You thought you could just continue this affair and then come back to me when it suited you. You've broken my trust, and trust is not something that can be easily repaired." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of our shared history and the destruction of our marriage. I could see the reality of what had happened settling in her mind. I had taken the initiative, and now she was left to grapple with the consequences of her actions. "I'm going to need time," I said finally, my voice softer but firm. "Time to figure out what I want, what I need. This isn't just about you anymore. I have to protect myself." Sarah nodded, her face a mask of despair. "I understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'll give you space." I turned away, the pain of the moment clawing at my chest. I had always been the one to put her first, to prioritize our relationship above all else. But now, for the first time, I was prioritizing myself. It felt liberating and terrifying all at once. Over the next few days, I focused on rebuilding my life. I spent hours going through our financial records, organizing documents, and ensuring I had everything I needed to protect myself moving forward. I started to feel a sense of clarity, a direction I hadn't had in a long time. I was no longer just a husband, I was a man reclaiming his autonomy. But the emotional toll of the situation weighed heavily on me. I found myself grappling with feelings of loss and betrayal even as I took steps forward. I had lost the woman I had loved, the life we had built together. I often thought back to the moments we had shared, the laughter, the dreams, the plans for the future. All of it felt tainted now, overshadowed by her betrayal. I began to spend more time with friends, seeking solace in their company. I needed to reconnect with the world outside of my marriage, to remind myself that I was still a person worthy of love and respect. I found comfort in their support, their understanding of my situation. They encouraged me to focus on my own happiness and to take this time to rediscover who I was outside of my relationship with Sarah. Yet, despite the support, I struggled with the thought of Sarah and Mark together. I imagined them laughing, sharing secrets, and building a life that should have been ours. It made my blood boil, and I had to remind myself that I was better than this. I was taking control of my life, and nothing would stand in my way. As the days turned into weeks, I made the decision to consult a lawyer. I needed to understand my rights and the implications of our situation. I was determined to ensure that I would not be left vulnerable, that I would secure my future no matter what. The thought of a divorce loomed large, and I knew it was inevitable. When I met with the attorney, I laid out the details of my situation, the evidence of Sarah's infidelity, and my concerns about our financial assets. The attorney listened attentively, offering advice and guidance on how to navigate the process. I felt a sense of empowerment as I discussed my options, realizing that I had the ability to shape my future. The conversation with my attorney solidified my resolve. I was ready to move forward, to take the necessary steps to protect myself and ensure that Sarah faced the consequences of her actions. I would not be a victim, I would reclaim my power. But as I left the attorney's office, I felt a pang of sadness wash over me. I was closing the door on a chapter of my life, and while I knew it was necessary, it still felt like a loss. The future was uncertain, but I knew that I had the strength to face whatever came next. I was ready to rise from the ashes of betrayal, to rebuild my life on my own terms. With a renewed sense of purpose, I prepared myself for the next phase of this journey. I would confront the reality of my situation, and I would emerge stronger than ever. The financial war was far from over, but I was ready to fight. The days that followed my decision to consult a lawyer were both liberating and daunting. I had taken the first steps toward reclaiming my life, but I knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. The emotional weight of betrayal still lingered, but I was determined to navigate this new chapter with strength and clarity. I initiated the divorce proceedings, serving Sarah with the papers in a way that was both firm and respectful. I wanted to make it clear that this wasn't just about revenge. It was about protecting myself and moving forward. When I handed her the papers, I saw a flicker of shock in her eyes, quickly replaced by a mask of defiance. "You think this will solve everything?" she spat, her voice trembling with anger. "No, Sarah," I replied, my tone steady. "This isn't about solving anything. It's about me taking control of my life. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine." As the days turned into weeks, the divorce process unfolded like a slow, painful extraction. I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, relief, and even a sense of empowerment. I was finally taking charge of my narrative, and with each step I took, I felt a little more like myself again. The financial negotiations were difficult, but I had the evidence I needed to ensure a fair settlement. My attorney was skilled and relentless, and together we navigated the complexities of our shared assets. I had spent countless hours preparing, and now it was paying off. I was no longer a passive participant. I was an active player in my own life. I remember one particular meeting where we discussed the division of our assets. Sarah sat across the table, her defiance waning as she realized the weight of her actions. I could see the realization settling in. She had lost not just my trust, but also her security. I felt a pang of sympathy for her, but I quickly pushed it aside. This was about survival. As we finalized the settlement, I took a moment to reflect on how far I had come. I had transformed from a man who felt betrayed and powerless into someone who was taking control of his destiny. I was reclaiming my financial independence, ensuring that I wouldn't be left vulnerable again. I had learned valuable lessons about trust, love, and the importance of self-worth. After the settlement was finalized, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. I had emerged from the storm battered but unbroken. I was ready to embrace a new beginning, to explore life beyond the confines of my past. I began to think about what I wanted for my future, free from the shadows of betrayal. I started to reconnect with my passions, writing, traveling, and spending time with friends. I took a trip to the mountains, immersing myself in nature, allowing the fresh air to cleanse my mind. I found solace in the quiet, and for the first time in months I felt a sense of peace. I was rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage, and it felt exhilarating. Gradually, I began dating again. I was cautious at first, hesitant to open my heart to someone new. But as I met new people, I realized that I was ready to love again, ready to share my life with someone who valued trust and respect. I learned to communicate better, to establish boundaries, and to prioritize my own needs. As I moved forward, I often reflected on the lessons I had learned through this painful experience. Betrayal had shattered my trust, but it had also taught me resilience. I had discovered my strength, my ability to rise from the ashes of heartbreak. I was no longer the man who had been blindsided. I was a survivor, a warrior reclaiming his life. Months later, I found myself in a new relationship with someone who appreciated me for who I was. The connection was built on honesty and mutual respect, and it felt refreshing to share my life with someone who valued trust. I was no longer defined by my past. I was forging a new path, one that was filled with hope and possibility. As I sat in my new apartment looking out at the city skyline, I felt a sense of gratitude. I had endured pain, but I had also emerged stronger and wiser. I had taken control of my life, and while the scars of betrayal would always remain, they served as a reminder of my resilience. I had won the financial war, but more importantly, I had won back my sense of self. I was ready to embrace the future, to live life on my own terms, and to love again without fear. The journey had been long and arduous, but I had come out on the other side, ready to write the next chapter of my life. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, and smiled. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it with open arms. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free.